resume our assembly, which was adjourned. So we will be taking all the items that we had left unfinished when we last met. Now, on the agenda, we have item 2, but we will begin with item 3, which is talking about the general debate on the theme, harnessing science, technology, and innovation for a more peaceful and sustainable future. Then we will go back to the emergency item. Colleagues, we have had substantive and robust deliberations over the past 3 days, having had 157 interventions from 113 national parliaments and 14 partner organizations. Speakers of Parliament, deputy speakers,
time of unprecedented technological progress, we are faced with both immense opportunities as well as pressing challenges. From artificial intelligence to climate change, the potential of STI is vast, but so are the risks of deepening inequalities. It is our responsibility as parliamentarians to ensure that these advancements serve the common good, governed by ethical principles, inclusive government and global cooperation for the common good. We applaud the bold decisions of nations that have preemptively banned inhumane advanced weapons, setting a precedent for responsible technological governance. This reflects the urgency of acting collectively to ensure that STI fosters trust, peace, and global cooperation.
We are encouraged by recent international commitments, including the Pact for the Future and the Global Digital Compact, adopted at the 2024 UN General Assembly. These arguments offer a roadmap for us to work with governments, the United Nations, and civil society to ensure inclusive and ethical approaches to STI. As representatives of the people, it is our duty to ensure that the benefits of STI reach everyone. We must bridge the digital divide, both between and within nations, and ensure that technological advancements serve all generations and communities. Ethical frameworks are essential to govern STI, ensuring progress aligns with human rights standards and serves societal values. We must also ensure that women, youth, and groups in vulnerable or marginalized situations are fully involved in shaping the future of STI. Their perspectives are critical for ensuring that technological progress is inclusive and equitable. Empowering these groups is not only just, it is essential for creating a diverse and innovative future.
To meet today's global challenges, we must commit to evidence-based policymaking and international collaboration. We must urge nations to invest in research and development, foster science diplomacy, and integrate scientific expertise into parliamentary decisions. STI must drive progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, help build resilient societies, and promote lasting peace. We must mitigate the risks of emerging technologies. Ethical AI development, cybersecurity, and digital privacy are vital to ensuring that technology upholds human rights and is used for peaceful purposes. We must also take steps to prevent the spread of misinformation and harmful content, particularly online, to safeguard social cohesion and democracy.
The technological challenges we face transcend borders, and international cooperation is the only way forward. Together, we can close the STI gap, reduce risks, and build a more secure, prosperous digital world. We, members of parliament from around the world, therefore, reconfirm our commitment to global parliamentary dialogue on STI governance. We welcome the IPU Charter on the ethics of science and technology and the resolution on AI's impact on democracy, and we pledge to bring these principles back to our respective parliaments. By working together, we can harness the power of STI to create a more equitable, sustainable, and technologically advanced world. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. So, colleagues, after that presentation, do I take it that we adopt the declaration? Thank you so much. Sorry?
There's Ireland that wants to take the floor. Yeah, we've adopted.
Yeah. Yes, according to our procedure, we have adopted and then we allow others to take the floor. So having adopted our resolution, I would like to thank the young parliamentarians for the job well done of presenting this to us. Ireland, you have the floor. Please request the floor. 1 minute, please.
Madam Chair, I think this is an excellent document, but there is one weakness in it that I want to flag, and that is the declaration fails to explicitly call for the promotion of knowledge sharing, especially North-South, as emphasised in Article 9 of the IPU Ethical Charter on Science and Technology, adopted by the Governing Council this morning. My colleague from Nigeria referenced vaccines, and my part of the world hasn't exactly covered itself in glory in terms of sharing COVID vaccines quite recently. Our Indonesian colleague referenced the sharing of water technology. So I'm requesting that the declaration would include wording to strengthen worldwide collaboration and exchange in scientific knowledge development and related technology innovations to reflect the need to share technology throughout the world. Thank you.
Colleagues, we take note of what our colleague from Ireland has raised, and it will form part of the records of this meeting. So, having done that, we go back now to item 2. Colleagues, as you are aware, on Tuesday we decided to add to our agenda item number 2, an emergency item on the response by parliamentarians to the urgent plea by the United Nations Secretary General to recommit to multilateralism for global peace, justice and sustainability. We held a discussion in plenary yesterday morning on this item, and a drafting committee met in the course of the afternoon yesterday to finalize the text with representatives from all the geopolitical groups. May I now invite the rapporteur from the drafting committee, Mr. Cesar Randon Garcia of Mexico, to introduce the draft resolution. Mr. Garcia, you have the floor.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, who is also very often the bearer of good news, fellow parliamentarians, I am here today to inform you of the outcome of deliberations of the Drafting Committee on the Emergency Item Resolution, which met yesterday afternoon, 16th of October. The item before you is the outcome of a proposal jointly submitted by the delegations of France, United Kingdom, Germany, Netherlands, and Canada. The title of the resolution before this Assembly reads as follows: Response by parliamentarians to the urgent plea by the UN Secretary General to recommit to multilateralism for global peace, justice, and sustainability. The delegations represented on the drafting committee were those of Argentina, Australia, Burkina Faso, Canada, Germany, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Jordan, Palestine, the Russian Federation, and my own, Mexico. I thank Ms. Michelle Rempel-Garnier from Canada for her professional and respectful chairing and skillful and efficiently seeing us through the challenges we faced. And Madam President, believe me, there were many challenges. The debate was lively, deep, and very thought-provoking. You will see in the resolution the removal of names of specific countries where there is ongoing conflict. I believe it is important for me to explain why. During the course of our discussion, it became clear that many members of the committee wished to address the text around specific conflicts. With the appreciation of the chair, she gave each member of the committee the opportunity to express ourselves relative to the specific concerns we had. After listening to all concerns related to specific countries, the committee agreed it would not be able to find acceptable language for the text given the range of conflicts from Gaza, Lebanon, to Sudan, Myanmar, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Ukraine, and more. The committee therefore agreed to remove all reference to naming specific conflicts in the interest of maintaining the principle of committing our support to strengthening multilateralism and the contributing to the building of a more resilient, just, sustainable world for the benefit of all citizens. The result of our drafting committee deliberations, Madam President, is the result that highlights the gravity of the challenges the global community is facing and the urgent need for our collective response to these challenges. The resolution clearly reaffirms support for multilateralism through the United States, which remains the cornerstone of the multilateral system and of international cooperation. It also highlights our obligations as members of Parliament to ensure we hold to account our respective governments to show full respect for the Charter of the United Nations. Before placing this resolution before the Assembly, the committee has also agreed to call upon the IPU to establish structures to redesign its emergency item submission, debate, and drafting process, with the aim to establish transparent rules-based process which facilitates productive dialogue between IPU members, resulting in meaningful consensus-based resolutions, and present its findings to the Assembly. Madam President, we have a resolution that calls on all of us to commit to the defense of the principles of peace, human rights, dignity, equality, justice, and solidarity, and to recommit to the purpose and principles of multilateralism. I commend it to this Assembly for approval. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have had the draft resolution. Do I take that we are ready to adopt this resolution? It is so decided. The resolution is adopted, but we have a request here. We have a request according to our Article 32, Sub-Article 2, that delegations may take the floor after the adoption and register their concerns. So once we have had those, we will take them into account. So I have the request from the Russian Federation, Mr. Konstantin Kosachev, and then I have seen Palestine also requesting for the floor. So we will begin with the Russian Federation. Mr. Kosachev, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to commend the efforts of the drafting committee and specifically the rapporteur. Thank you very much for what you've done. You have redrafted the initial text in a very good manner, and the resolution finally is definitely to be approved and adopted. What I cannot commend at all is the initial motion for the emergency item, which was presented by France, United Kingdom, and some more countries. One reason is the topic itself was not that emerging. In the initial text, I could find at least 15 different emergency items to be addressed, and all of them were included in the initial text, and we were supposed to take our position within a couple of hours' time. This is not fair to our Assembly, to the Union, to make these kind of proposals. This is my first comment. But what is more important, after fact-checking the explanatory memorandum, we discovered that it was based on false grounds. The Secretary General, and it was stated here in the first sentence, never addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 20th of September. And that was the reason this item was called an emergency item. At that date, the 20th of September this year, the General Assembly did not have a meeting, a sitting at all. And what is even worse, the sites which were prescribed to the Secretary General of the United Nations here was not what Mr. Secretary General usually pronounced. It's not his language. And by that, our Assembly, during the debate on how we will choose the emergency debate, was misled and manipulated, deliberately or undeliberately, but this is not a misprint. This is a false information. And I feel so sorry about that, because we could have had a different emergency debate. Yesterday, our hemicycle was almost empty, and we had just 4 contributions to the emergency item debate because it was not so much interesting for everybody here. Unfortunately, we could not use opportunities to discuss other really important emergency items like the situation in the Middle East. And I believe that our Assembly needs some kind of apology from those who moved this motion for emergency item. But otherwise, the final result again is absolutely acceptable. Well done. Thank you once again, the drafting committee and Your Excellency, Mr. Rapporteur. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague. We have noted your concerns as per the rules. And now we will go to Palestine. Please request the floor. We will end this session with Argentina. Palestine, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة وبداية أود أن أتوجه.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to thank the drafting committee and the rapporteur for all of the work that they have done. I'm sure they wanted to work in a positive and constructive way in order to come up with this resolution, which does include a number of ideas that are significant to us. And these are concrete sorts of points. I would tend to agree with what the representative of Russia had to say about what an emergency item is. We need to think about the IPU and its emergency items and come up with some clear definitions so that we don't have a politicization of the whole process, and ensure that we're in a position to work properly when it comes to these items. And that would enable us to ensure that our resolutions are of genuine assistance to world parliaments when it comes to meeting the challenges that we all face. Multilateralism has had a difficult time, and while it has led to an international system, we seem to have strayed from what we originally agreed, and under considerable pressure. I don't think that parliamentarians can ignore what is happening to us, the Palestinian people, and this is the result of a 1947 of the General Assembly in 1947, when the mistaken decision to divide the land into two and one state took our land, thus rejecting the UN resolutions. Human life must be our primary concern. All of us have to do what we can to preserve human life, because if we have double standards, we're going to end up completely destroying this international multilateral system that we have agreed, and we will be making life very difficult for us. And we will end up with a situation of no benefit to anybody at all, and in particular, of no use to future generations. Parliamentarians have a fundamental responsibility here. And as Palestinians, we do our best to elect a democratic parliament have done our best to try to elect a parliament democratically, as we did 6 years ago, but we're being prevented from so doing, and we would like you to stand with us so that we can have elections and we can work with the IPU. But thank you once again to everybody. Thank you, Madam President.
Argentina, please request the floor and we will close this item. Argentina, request the floor. Go ahead.
You turned it off. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Go ahead. He keeps turning it off.
Don't touch it. Touch it once. Once it shows green, leave it, and then it will turn red.
It is green. No.
It's
okay.
red now.
Hola, hola,
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam President. A resolution. This is a resolution that was by a drafting committee that was supposed to consider the text, not to do away with half of it. Now, if you have an ongoing policy of bringing obstacles in our way, as done by the Russian Federation, for instance, will mean that we won't be able to move forward. So the quote for the Secretary General of the United Nations was not for 24, but it was 22. Now, on the basis of this understanding about what the UN Secretary General said, the Russian Federation wanted to do away with all this and then not want to refer to the United Nations, which is a strange way of referring to it. Now, we can't say that there was no emergency in 2022. Now, the world in which we're today is much worse than what was obtaining in 2022. I've heard countless appeals to respecting the UN resolutions, and I've just heard the Palestinian delegation say that the 1947 UN resolutions were unfair because they generated the conflict. But this was a resolution that was accepted by Israel, but not by the Arab states, which rejected the resolution and caused war and went to war. So I'm very pleased to hear the Palestinian delegation talking about the two-state solution, which was rejected in 1947, but they're accepting it now. I regret much in this resolution. I'm sorry there's been no reference to conflict. I'm regretting the fact that there's no reference to the ceasefire that we all want, without saying that there is a need for this ceasefire to involve the release of some 100 hostages who have been held for over a year, including some Argentinians who should have been released. And they have spent a very long time in captivity. And I understand the need to protect life. So why don't you tell Hamas that they have an obligation to protect life, because they are the ones who have taken these hostages and committed any number of crimes. And according to Argentinian law, they are responsible for attacks on the Israeli embassy and are responsible for another terrorist attack in our country. So let's protect life and not have double standards. I do agree, Madam President.
There's a point of
Palestine, is that a point of order? Because you have already addressed the Assembly on this matter. Is it a point of order? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Argentina. Now, point of order from Palestine.
أعتقد أن الموضوع هو نقاش التقرير الذي تم اعتماده والحديث.
Thank you, Madam President. We are supposed to be discussing the draft resolution on the emergency item rather than having a history lesson that seems to show that the Argentinian representative does not seem to know very well. I feel that you should have stopped him from lecturing us, Madam. Thank you.
I think we have to close that. We have to close this issue, colleagues. So, as per our procedure, we have already adopted this resolution. The concerns that have been raised by the members will be duly noted. So, having done that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has participated in drafting this resolution, irrespective of the challenges that we still have, but at least it's a good step. So thank you so much, the movers of this motion, but also those who participated in drafting it, so that the voice from a broader spectrum was heard. So thank you so much. Item 3, colleagues, we had already dealt with it. So we are now moving to item number 5 of our agenda, which we have before us now, the resolution prepared by the Standing Committee on Democracy and Human Rights on the impact of artificial intelligence on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Further to the work of the Standing Committee, the revised draft resolution has been circulated to you, colleagues, as Assembly Document number A/149/5-DR. I now invite the two rapporteurs of this draft resolution, Ms. Michelle Rampel-Ganya of Canada and Ms. Neema Rugangira of Tanzania, to introduce the resolution. And since both of them are on the podium, I will also give them a chance to decide the way they have decided how they are going to address us. Both of you have the floor. Thank you.
Is it on? Thank you, Madam President. It's a great honor for Michelle and I to stand before you, and I'll be touching on the process that we underwent to prepare this resolution. 12 months ago in Angola, after several conversations, Michelle and I decided to put forward a proposal of the IPU resolution on the impact of artificial intelligence on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we appeared 3 times before the Committee on Democracy and Human Rights, and we were able to present and defend, and the proposal was subsequently accepted, and it was passed and decided in the 147th IPU Assembly that we will be endorsing it or adopting it today, and here we are. Michelle and I recognize that in order to harness the potential of artificial intelligence, we also need to mitigate the risks of artificial intelligence, particularly on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And in order to do that, we decided to ensure that we have a strong participatory process throughout the drafting of this resolution. And we brought forward a new way of doing things here at the IPU. We introduced a consultative process, and we thank the IPU for being accommodative. We organized 3 artificial intelligence workshops that were online, and more than 330 members of parliament from 110 parliaments participated. And then we organized another artificial intelligence workshop in Geneva at the 148th Assembly, together with a preparatory debate where more than 150 members of parliament participated. As you can tell, that this process has been very inclusive and participatory. And this entire process not only triggered interest from members of parliament, but also enriched Michelle and I to be able to draft the resolution that you have before you. And most importantly, just to sum up, is that we believe at a time where the world is divided with so many conflicts, we have been able to come together as parliamentarians from different worlds to discuss such a pertinent topic and reach a consensus on the resolution that you have before you. So it is my hope that both Michelle and I are hoping that this resolution on the impact of artificial intelligence on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law will be put to life, will be used, and will be implemented into tangible actions and results. And accordingly, the IPU will lead the process of making sure that the IPU becomes a pioneer of ensuring that we have a global minimum standard of artificial intelligence. And I'll now hand over to Michelle to talk about the contents.
Thank you, colleagues. Colleagues, I want to thank all of the delegations that submitted, I believe it was over 200 amendments to the draft text. I'm thanking you now, but we weren't thanking you a few weeks ago when we were going through all of these, only because there was so much good content and perspectives that I think we both learned a lot from. To conclude on the process, we can assure you that what we tried to do was to take every single one of the amendment proposals and put it into the final draft text that's before you today. And I think the conversation that we had in the steering committee shows, the result shows the conversation that we had, which was approach from a consensus building perspective and resulted in a unanimous consent on the report. Colleagues, our final product touches on many aspects of this particular debate, which we hope will be actioned by your parliaments, as well as initiatives that are already underway at the IPU. The resolution talks about the need for education and capacity building within parliaments, but also within the general public on the economic and societal transformations that could happen because of artificial intelligence, with an emphasis on the potential benefits and threats that this poses to democracy and human rights. We want to thank the work of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, who put forward many excellent suggestions for bringing a gender lens to this particular work, and we feel that the final text reflects those discussions. The other big thanks that we want to give out a shout out to is to Dennis Naughton and his working group on science technology, which worked hand and glove with us on this for over a year. Dennis was a wonderful champion of 2 very strong women, and we want to thank him for that, as well as the Secretariat. A special shout out to Andy Richardson, as well as to our teams in our home country, my staff in Canada, as well as Nima's in Tanzania, and both of our delegation secretaries for all their hard work. Colleagues, we think that this is a comprehensive text which can be built on and will stand the test of time as we see a global transformation from artificial intelligence. And colleagues, I just want to close by echoing what Naima said as we close the assembly today. There are so many issues that divide us. There are so many reasons for us to not talk to each other across cultural divides, to learn from each other. Absolutely. But the IPU can provide a forum in which we can build trust and learn from one another. I learned so much from you, Naima. And I feel like I have a lifelong friend. So colleagues, thank you for what was really a positive experience, and we hope that you will all accept this text, take it home and embrace it in your parliaments, and maybe outwit the big tech companies while we're doing it. Thank you, colleagues.
And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Neema. So, colleagues, do I take it that we adopt this resolution? It is decided, and I don't see any delegation wanting to take the floor. So, members, thank you so much for all your participation. As the two co-rapporteurs have spoken here, how you have all participated, thank you. But at the same time, thank you for this novelty that you have come up with. And we believe this is going to form now the baseline for our parliaments to start looking into how we are going to begin regulating the development of the use of AI in our countries, taking into account the challenges that our two colleagues have raised, because we are parliamentarians, so we are concerned not just on the positive side of AI, but also on the other side of AI, where, you know, we can be deeply affected during elections, and that will impact on our democracy, but also human rights and how the deep fakes can actually affect us. At the same time, also the issues of good governance. So thank you so much, Neema. Thank you so much, Michelle. Well done. A round of applause, dear colleagues. So, colleagues, that was item 5. So now we move to item 6, reports of the standing committees. And on this, we are going to begin with our Standing Committee on Peace and International Security. And I would like to invite the acting president of the committee, Mr. Wehley of Switzerland, to present to us the report. Mr. Wehley, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Here I am once again, dear colleagues, to report back to you on Committee 1, that is the Standing Committee on Peace and International Security. At this 149th IPU Assembly on the 14th of October, we held a meeting on the role of parliamentarians in preventing conflicts and on natural resources, or linked to natural resources. We then discussed the growing importance of the economic aspects of conflicts. We stressed that climate change is becoming more important, and it's important to have legislation that will ensure a fair distribution of resources such as water, minerals, fertile land, and also to effectively prevent conflicts. We then continued our discussions on nuclear security. At the round table, we stressed that all countries, even if they don't have nuclear centers, that they should all focus on the safety of radioactive material. There's a crucial role of parliaments in ratifying and implementing these agreements, and we recognize that fact. We also looked at the need to protect radioactive material, while at the same time facilitating international cooperation for peaceful use. On the 16th of October, we had an experts meeting to promote the two-state solution in Palestine. We had both the Palestinian and Israel party, as well as two experts present, looking at a new definition of what the two-state solution could be. We discussed the role of parliaments to promote sustainable peace in the region, stressing good governance, security, and the dignity of peoples. This last meeting made it possible for Mr. Asni bin Hamad, parliamentarian from Malaysia, to be elected to the Bureau of the committee and to be elected vice president. We congratulate him and look forward to working together with him. On the 16th of October, the Bureau of the committee met and we talked about our activities on peace and security with regard to different conflicts around the world, and we began thinking about subjects that we want to put forward to the committee to study. We finished looking at the anti-personal landmine ban treaty, and we also looked at the event with the Prince of Jordan, who is carrying out action to promote the universalization of this anti-landmine treaty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, do we note this report? Thank you so much. It is so noted. May I also take this opportunity to recall, dear colleagues, that at the 148th Assembly this past March, the Assembly approved the theme of the next resolution of the First Standing Committee, which will deal with the role of Parliament in advancing the two-state solution in Palestine. Two rapporteurs were identified on this occasion, Mr. Bochet of Algeria and Speaker Batima of Ireland. The Assembly also agreed that, as proposed by the Bureau of the Standing Committee, given the complexity of this issue and the wish to render this exercise as inclusive as possible, that I would, as President of IPU, engage in consultation with a view to identifying additional rapporteurs from the other regions. I am pleased to inform you, colleagues, that following such consultations, I'd like to propose the following additional rapporteurs to work on the draft resolution that will be submitted for adoption on the occasion of the 150th IPU Assembly in April 2025. Ms. Marcela Guerra of Mexico, who will help us bring the perspective of women, peace and security. Ms. Sovina Vardanyan of Armenia, who will bring in the youth perspectives. But we also have Mr. Tangi Utikere of New Zealand and Deputy Speaker Tsepang Sitamosena of Lesotho. I don't know if they are all here. Marcela, she has just left. Sovina Vardanyan of Armenia, are you in? It's probably out as well. Tangi Utikere of New Zealand. Okay. And Deputy Speaker Tsepang Sitamosena of Lesotho. Okay. Sorry? Where? I don't see her. But anyway, we have consulted with them and they're ready to join this team. So, colleagues, we will have a group of 6 rapporteurs, 3 women and 3 men from all our geopolitical groups to work on this critically important resolution. And that said, I wish that the Assembly would endorse this proposal. Thank you very much, colleagues. It is so decided. I would like now to pass on to the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development. And on this, I will invite the President of the Committee, Mr. Waven William of Seychelles, to present the report. Mr. William, you have the floor.
All glory be to God, the Almighty, for His grace and favor. On the outset, I would like to express my thanks to IPU Secretariat, our Committee Secretary, Alexandria, Carly, and Isabel for their usual dedicated support. I would also like to thank members of our committee for their valuable contributions during our deliberations these past few days. And Dennis, my friend, I would like to thank you for being a mentor, and the committee wish you all the best in your future undertakings. Madam President, the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development held 3 debates during this assembly, with participation from approximately 50 delegations. The first debate focused on parliamentary strategies to mitigate the lasting effects of conflicts including armed conflicts, on sustainable development. This aligns with the theme of a resolution to be presented at the committee's next session in April 2025. Delegates unanimously recognize that conflicts hinder progress towards the SDGs. Often reversing gains already made, parliamentarians were urged to advocate for sustainable development strategies that positively impact conflict prevention, responses, and recovery. Central to these efforts is engagement with the communities to address their needs. The second debate centered on preparations for the parliamentary meeting at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP29, scheduled for 16 to 17 November in Baku, Azerbaijan, in the COP Green Zone. Mr. Sultan Mamadov, the rapporteur, presented the key directions of the preliminary draft outcome document expected to be adopted. He emphasized the document's call for parliaments to support legislations aimed at reducing greenhouse gases emissions, facilitating the transition to green and renewable energy, and advancing the implementation of the NDCs. Amendments to the draft document submitted by 5 countries meeting the deadline are currently under review. Parliamentarians from 8 countries, alongside members of the IPU Advisory Group on Health, provided additional recommendations, suggesting the inclusion of language on green jobs, agroforestry, health-related climate impacts, accelerating the loss and damage funds across process, and its sustainability mechanism. The third debate, Madam President, addressed the role of parliaments in preventing corporate tax avoidance and advancing sustainable development. Experts from the OECD and UNDP engaged in a robust dialogue, moderated by Senator Deborah O'Neill from Australia, on how tax revenue can help achieve the SDGs. With only 5 years remaining to meet the 2030 agenda and an estimated US $4 trillion required, effective taxation is seen as a key tool to finance the SDGs. A well-functioning tax system can generate revenue for public services, spur national economic growth, combat illicit financial flows, reduce inequalities, and promote fairness. Parliamentarians have a vital role to play, from mobilizing domestic resources to partnering with tax authorities and educating the citizens on the importance of taxation for public services and sustainable development. Delegates engaged fully, underscoring the need for stronger legislative frameworks, corporate tax avoidance prevention, greater transparency, and enhanced multilateral cooperation. Additionally, the need for specific capacity building for parliamentarians on the subject. Last but not least, elections were held for positions on the bureau of the committee. Mr. Mohamed Zayed El Meher of Tunisia was elected as a new member, and Mr. Sergei Gavrilov from the Russian Federation was elected for a second term. The committee also approved its work plan for the 150th IPU Assembly, dedicating all sittings to drafting the resolution. In conclusion, Madam President, let me leave you with this reality finding. According to the UN on SDGs, only 17% of the SDG targets are on track to be met on time. Recent assessment shows that the world's poorest and vulnerable groups are mostly being affected. Whilst I commend the IPU for adopting numerous declarations and resolutions illustrating Parliament's political will, there is the need to step up parliamentary coordinated action plan to accelerate the implementation, echoed in the workshop held on the 14th October on the theme Practical Tools to Achieve the SDGs. Excellencies, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on a note for further reflection, are we representatives of the people doing ourselves justice? Are we at peace with ourselves to put aside our differences, to build bridges between us, and to unify our efforts for precision in our efforts and actions? Do not let our emotions deny us the opportunity to do what is right, just, and fair. Above all else, let us not lose sight of the IPU guiding principles and values. Madam President, I have been advised to say this by the IPU Seeds Grouping's President, to thank IPU, Madam President, you and the SG for making space for the group to meet, and that the Seeds Group looks forward for more official recognition in the transformation of IPU going forward to address the vulnerable groupings towards achieving the SDGs. I wish you all a safe trip back home, and as you go, be always mindful of how, in your respective countries, you can influence the acceleration of Sustainable Development Action Plan implementation to the best of your ability. Madam President, I thank you.
Thank you so much, William. Colleagues, do I take it that the Assembly takes note of this report? Thank you very much. It is so decided. Now I'd like to go on and call the President for the Standing Committee on the United Nations Affairs, Mr. McGuinty of Canada, to present his report. Mr. McGuinty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much, colleagues, those of you who are still here. That shows quite a bit of dedication. Colleagues, our committee held 2 meetings over the past week, on Tuesday and Wednesday. In just over 4 hours, over 2 sittings, we covered a lot of ground, with discussions ranging from the complexities of the United Nations budget to the role of the G20 in relation to the United Nations, and the role of parliaments in the United Nations treaty-making process. Furthermore, we followed up on the 2 practical motions the committee adopted at previous assemblies, one on gender equality in the General Assembly and another on Security Council reform. We're encouraging each member and all of you to act on these motions, bring them to your parliaments, introduce them on the floor, bring them to your committees, share them with your head of state, take steps to operationalize them. Let me highlight how our rich debate raised a number of key points over those meetings. First, parliaments have a key role to play in overseeing the United Nations budget process. The UN spends roughly $74 billion a year. What does that mean? First and foremost, ensuring that our nation's assessed contributions to the UN are paid in full and on time. Parliamentarians told us they need a better understanding of the UN budget process, and discussion in this regard will continue at our committee. At the same time, the United Nations has got to make efforts to make its budgeting far more transparent. The current financial crisis at the UN has got to be addressed without delay to ensure continuity of support to countries in desperate need. Ideally, the United Nations should have the lead role in coordinating global economic governance, and the G20 should be focused on implementing those UN outcomes that are more fully within the power of the leading economies who meet there. For this to happen, however, the UN should first strengthen its own deliberative processes. Many members have walked away from the ECOSOC process. We need to get that back. Parliaments are ultimately responsible for funding the UN and the G20 and for ensuring these institutions actually work well together. Every effort has got to be made to avoid competition and duplication of work. We are the recipients of the outcomes. We receive the treaties, the resolutions, the commitments, the targets, the actions, the calls to action. Every effort's got to be made to avoid competition and duplication of work. Another angle, what is the role of the P20? That is the meeting of the speakers of parliaments from the G20 countries, and that needs further clarification. Those P20 parliaments have got to contribute more actively to deliberations, with additional debates held within their relevant parliamentary committees. So a stronger institutional link between the P20 and the G20 proper will ensure that our community, and we speak for our peoples, that community is actually heard. Parliaments have a role, finally, in the ratification and implementation of treaties, even where the Constitution establishes a strict separation of powers between executive and legislative branches. At a minimum, parliaments can help raise public awareness and support for a new treaty, and ask their government for regular briefings on the treaty-making process. Finally, very pleased to announce that 5 members were elected to the Bureau, 5 new members. They are Mr. Al-Nouri from Libya, Ms. Basirovna from the Russia Federation, Mr. Rashkov from Belarus, Mr. Thakur from India, and Mr. Laram from Germany. Mr. Bustamante from Peru was re-elected to a 2nd term. Congratulations to all the new members on their appointment. Looking forward to working with them. Finally, folks, we're strongly encouraging their member parliaments and those of our other Bureau members to ensure they are included in the delegations to the upcoming IPU assemblies and available to participate. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations and the IPU have a rich and growing relationship. We're going to have to work hard to make sure that that relationship is maintained. We're going to have to hold, to a certain extent, the United Nations to account so we can properly defend them in our respective parliaments. That is a central objective as we pursue our work at the committee. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. McKinty. Colleagues, do we take note of this report? It is noted. I would also like to take this opportunity to wish all the newly elected office holders of this committee, wish them success. So we hope to work closely with you. Colleagues, we now, having finished the reports of the standing committees, we now go to item 7 of our agenda, which is approval of the subject item for the Standing Committee on Democracy and Human Rights at the 151st IPU Assembly and appointment of the co-rapporteurs. Colleagues, document A/149/7-R.1, as you will see, the Standing Committee on Democracy and Human Rights is proposing as its subject item for the next 1-year cycle the theme of recognizing and supporting the victims of illegal international adoption and taking measures to prevent this practice. Mr. De Maegd from Belgium and Ms. Kressel from Argentina have been designated as co-rapporteurs on this subject, together with Mr. Patra from India. So, colleagues, do we adopt this decision? Thank you very much. It is so decided.
Mr. Mudenda wanted to take
Mr.
Mudenda, Zimbabwe.
Ah, okay. Wait. Zimbabwe, Speaker Mudenda, you have the floor.
Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable, thank you, Mr. President, because you have hit your hammer already. Before we could comment, it was at the speed of lightning. This subject matter, Madam President, as far as I can see, hasn't got the universal appeal. There are several issues that are taking place in the world now which will require, some interventions by parliaments. With all the due respect to the committee, I really feel that this subject has got limitations in terms of its expansiveness at the moment in the world. as you have already ruled, perhaps you can only take note of my observation, but otherwise it hasn't got the expansive qualification to really embrace universal approach in terms of looking at this subject. As far as the 180 parliaments are concerned, it is a very shallow subject, I'm afraid.
Well, like you rightly noted, we will take note, but even if we hadn't adopted, because the procedure, by the time the proposal comes here, it has already gone through the Bureau of the Standing Committee, then the Standing Committee has already approved it, and I want to think we also have representatives there, but that doesn't mean whatever views that you have that this is the end, because this is just, we are proposing the subject item. So it can always be broadened through our representatives to those committees and add whatever they feel would be more appropriate under the current situation, because you have a whole year working on this. So your points are noted, but at the same time, I believe the leadership of this committee and even the new members that we have elected in the course of the day will be taking note of what you have said, and they can definitely try to see what they can include in this, under this theme. So, colleagues, we had already adopted the decision in respect of the rapporteurs and the theme itself. Now, that said, we will go to item 8, which is talking about amendments to the IPU statutes and rules. Colleagues, in 2023, a broad consultation was carried out on possible amendments to the IPU statutes and rules, further to which proposals were gathered from member parliaments, the geopolitical groups, the IPU's specialized bodies, and the IPU Secretariat. The proposals were studied extensively by a working group established by the Executive Committee in March 2024. They held 3 meetings of the working group held 3 meetings between March and May 2024. Subsequently, at its meeting in Zanzibar in 2024 June, the Executive Committee agreed on a series of proposed amendments, which are distributed to you members as number capital A/149/8-P.1 for submission to the membership 3 months prior to the 149th Assembly as per Article 30 of the Statutes. By the deadline of 2nd September 2024, amendments to the statutes, and 14th September 2024, amendments to the rules, several member parliaments had availed themselves of the opportunity to provide feedback and propose sub-amendments. The admissible sub-amendments and clarifications from the Secretariat on several related points were sent to the membership on 26 October 2024. The document is numbered capital A/149/8-P.1-AM. At its meeting on 11th October 2024, the Executive Committee endorsed the sub-amendments proposed by France and Switzerland and referred the proposed amendment to Article 10, Sub-Article 1 of the statutes, along with the sub-amendments proposed by Thailand and Turkey, back to the working group for further consideration. The working group will resume its work later in 2024 to consider this matter along with other pending requests. This document, colleagues, contains the final proposed amendments to the statutes and rules of the Assembly. The Assembly is invited to adopt these amendments. And here we are using the word final in the sense that much as this is a work in progress, the amendments which have been agreed upon are being brought to you so that we approve them, and then they form part of our statutes and rules. So the other provisions which our working group is still working on, they are not part of this document. A separate document, colleagues, CL/214/9-P.1-Rev was approved earlier today, containing amendments to the rules of the Governing Council, the rules of the Executive Committee, the rules of the Standing Committee, the rules of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, and the rules and working modalities of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians. Dear colleagues, I believe you have had a chance to go through the amendments because these documents were circulated to you earlier in advance. And having done that and the brief explanation, which I have just given you, do we approve the amendments to the IPU statutes and assembly rules? It is so decided. Thank you very much. Colleagues, as per our practice, we usually hear some remarks from representatives of the geopolitical groups. Sometimes it's their president, sometimes it's their designate. So today we will hear also from the the following geopolitical groups, and I would request that, colleagues, you take a maximum of 2 minutes. So we will begin with the Arab group, will be followed by Asia Pacific. The Arab group will be represented by a member of parliament from Tunisia, Mr. Mehgoub. Mr. Mehgoub, you have the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين.
In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Speakers of Parliament, Heads of Delegation, ladies and gentlemen, may God's peace and blessings be upon you. I am addressing you this evening on behalf of the Arab group at the closing of this 149th Assembly. I would like to begin by thanking our President, the Secretary General, and all of the team on the Secretariat. Thank you to all of you for having ensured the smooth working of this Assembly. Thank you for everything that you have done to ensure that our parliamentary initiatives are strengthened. We have had a number of exchanges and rich debates in which we have considered a number of issues of concern throughout the world today. Sometimes we had quite passionate exchanges. That is, after all, the nature of parliamentary life. That is who we are. I simply hope that all of these debates will help us to better steer our parliamentary activities. We must ensure that we adopt a language of dialogue rather than a language of violence. This in order to ensure that we can ensure that everyone enjoys the respect for cultural, religious values. Madam President, we had hoped that the Arab group's emergency item proposal on the situation in Palestine would be adopted. We hope to convey a clear message to the world on the need to bring an end to the war in Gaza and the Middle East, a war that is victimizing women and children. That did not happen, but I'm sure that all people and all parliamentarians know that this silence, this impunity cannot continue. This must ensure that it does not continue, because the Zionist entity is continuing with its violence and its attacks and considers itself to be able to act with impunity. That seems to be the case, since no one seems to be able to bring an end to the Israeli actions. The United Nations can't, neither can those who remain silent. We must raise our flag high. We must be heard in order to ensure that international humanitarian law, international law are respected. If we remain silent, other countries might take the same kind of attitude, and that will mean that we will all be governed by the law of the jungle. I would ask all of you to do everything that you can to ensure that there is an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon and in Gaza in order to have Palestine at peace in an independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. I would invite my parliamentary colleagues to go back to their parliaments and invite them to implement the relevant United Nations resolutions on this question, and to take into account the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice too. We must, all of us here within the IPU, work actively for peace. We must bring an end to injustice, and we must ensure that this peace we have so long waited for is actually with us. May God's peace be upon you.
Asia Pacific, Mr. Zhong Yang from China. You have the floor.
Madam President, dear colleagues, thank you for giving me the floor. It's a great honor for me to address you today on behalf of APG. First of all, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to IPU President, the IPU Secretary General, and all of you here for your outstanding work for this assembly. Please allow me to explain the transition in the chair of Asia Pacific Group first. Since the previous chair was not able to continue its role, after consultations by the IPU Secretariat with members and in accordance with the rules of procedure of APG, China has taken the responsibility of serving as the new chair of the group. Effective from this APG meeting, and will remain in this position during the 115th IPU Assembly. On 13 October, we held the APG meeting, which was attended by 19 delegations. We would especially thank Madam President Tulia for attending and addressing the APG meeting, despite of her extremely tight schedule. The meeting was undoubtedly a great success, with plenty of consensus reached within the group. During the meeting, APG members expressed their strong support for and interest in participating in the IPO-related work. With a large number of candidates competing for vacancies within the APG for IPO positions. With concerted efforts of all members, 17 candidates were eventually nominated, and after coordination and votes, it was agreed that the APG will endow parliamentaries from Malaysia, Australia, India, Thailand, and Maldives as candidates to the corresponding committees and other bodies. We also deliberated on emergency item proposals. Additionally, China briefed the group on the first preparatory committee meeting for the 60th Speakers Conference. Last but not least, the Asia-Pacific Group would congratulate everyone present here for what we have achieved during this assembly, which is a resounding success in expanding our common ground as regards harnessing science, technology, and innovations for a more peaceful and sustainable future, boosting parliamentary cooperation in regulating the development of AI, combating corporate tax avoidance, strengthening ties with the UN, preserving peace for the world, and enhancing multilateralism, among others. The APG is happy and privileged to be part of this progress and stands ready to follow through our achievement hand in hand with other parliaments. It's our belief that given the turbulent international landscape and growing instability worldwide, it is the common aspirations of our parliaments as representatives of our peoples to promote cooperation, dialogue, solidarity, and just making considerable contributions to the common and bright future for mankind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Maria del Carmel. Maria del Carmel. This handwriting? Alva from GRULAC. You have the floor, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Deseo presentar mis saludos en nombre.
I bring you greetings from the GRULAC, and we, President of the IPU and Secretary General, we would like to thank and congratulate you, as well as the IPU staff, who, as usual, have done excellent work, and the Speaker very kindly thanks the interpreters. The President of GRULAC and the Vice President of the group would like to apologize for having had to go back home because of commitments they have there. We had 9 members at our first meeting. The delegations were Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Guyana, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Suriname. And our associate members were the Parlatina and Parla Sur assemblies. And their speakers were with us, the president from Cuba and Argentina, respectively, for these assemblies. we had to deal with vacancies on the executive committee, and we made decisions with respect to replace the MP from Uruguay who has stepped down, and I was honored with the election to this. Then we considered the emergency item, and we agreed on the situation of children involved in war throughout the world, and this resolution was sponsored by a number of GRULAC members. As you know, we didn't get 2/3 of support from when there was a vote on the emergency item, and we feel that there will be future occasions to consider the situation of children in war too. We would like to congratulate the Assembly of the IPU because we had 2 assemblies where we were not able to agree on an emergency item, but we have now done that, and we have agreed a resolution on the need to strengthen multilateralism in order to build peace and sustainability. I wish all of you a very safe trip home. I hope you all have a good weekend back in your homes, and look forward to seeing you at the next assembly.
Thank you so much, colleagues. This is our new member of the Executive Committee of the IPU. So you have seen her and you have heard her. Colleagues, now I'll call Mr. Kouassi from Côte d'Ivoire, representing the Africa Geopolitical Group.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, speakers, heads of delegation, participants. We have come to the end of the 149th Assembly of our Union. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all participants, but most particularly our President, Tulia, who has presided over our work with such brilliance. I would also like to extend thanks to the Secretary General. He has made invaluable contributions to the success of this Assembly. I would also like to thank the Swiss authorities for having hosted us in such comfort and so effectively. We are grateful to the IPU, which has awarded our colleague from Chad with their prize. Now that the curtain is coming down on this assembly, we must acknowledge that there is a persistence of armed conflict throughout the world. Even though we did not have it on our agenda, we must recall how serious the situation is in Gaza and the Lebanon. We must ensure that this region is steered towards peace. This thanks to the implementation of the relevant United Nations resolutions. Aside from the situation in the Middle East, we must also recognize the armed conflicts in Africa, particularly those raging in the DRC, Sudan, and some of the countries of the Sahel. Above and beyond these armed conflicts, our continent is also vulnerable to natural disaster and epidemics such as malaria, diphtheria, and monkeypox. We do face challenges, but I do believe in our resilience. We must ensure that we all defend multilateralism, political dialogue, the respect for international law, solidarity, peace, and development. Ladies and gentlemen, our people expect a great deal of us. It is our duty to do what they expect of us, and we must do this in keeping with the decisions made by our founding fathers. We must ensure that we keep up with the times. That is why we do support the working group on amendments on the statutes and rules, chaired by Ms. Muti of Zambia, another African contributing to the work of the IPU. We hope that this group will be able to look on the rules underpinning our adoption of an emergency item so that there is more clarity with respect to procedure there. And we also would like to see the work with what is being done in Africa in order to ensure that we strengthen those institutions. I wish all of you a safe trip home and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Now we will hear from 12 Plus, Mr. Laurent Welly from Switzerland, who is our host, but at the same time, he's now serving as Vice President of the 12 Plus group and the incoming President of the Geopolitical Group. Mr. Welly, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, colleagues, Mr. Secretary General, the 12 Plus met on the 12th of October for a long afternoon meeting that met every morning from the 14th to the 17th. It also celebrated its 50th anniversary. We would like to thank you, Madam President, and Mr. Secretary General for having joined us, and thank you, Madam President, for having given a speech when we celebrated that anniversary. The group elected a new president, yours truly. I would like to thank my predecessor, Senator Griffois, for everything that he did for the 12 Plus. He had to go back to Belgium, which is why I am taking the floor on his behalf now. The 12 Plus were very active in the various committee meetings that were held here. I would like to thank Ms. Michelle Rempel of Canada for her work on AI and its effects on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we would also like to congratulate our colleague on the election as rapporteur for one of the forthcoming resolutions. And we also would like to thank the President of the Committee on the United Nations, who's going to be looking at very complicated and significant issues. We would also like to thank Mr. Norton of Ireland, who is our dynamic chair for the group on science and technology. And we now today have the ethical charter on science and technology, partly as a result of his hard work. And we would also like to thank our colleague from the Netherlands, who has worked on the Committee on Middle East questions. Then we would also like to thank our colleagues who've done work on the emergency item, and Ms. Rempel, who chaired the drafting committee so admirably. Madam President, we've had some rather intense discussions in recent days, and we'd like to thank you for the able way in which you have presided over our work. And we know that you have every interest in exploring all avenues to dialogue in the interests of peace. That said, our group does continue to regret your visit to President Putin. He is indeed a head of state, but we have adopted resolutions against him because of war crimes in Ukraine, because of the removal of children from Ukraine to Russia. Colleagues, I'm very well aware that we must avoid double standards, but you must bear in mind that Ukraine has done nothing but respect international law and defend itself from an aggressor that has used every possible excuse for attacking it. Madam President, we are pleased that we have had a fruitful meeting. I think we must now move forward, and the 12 Plus has every intention of continuing to work with you for the IPU and for all that the IPU might be doing in the future in the interests of peace particularly. We welcome what is currently under consideration by the Executive Committee, and we are committed to working with everyone else towards on all of those principles which we believe in and on all those undertakings we have made. I would like to thank colleagues for all the inspiring contributions they've made to our debates. I would like to thank the Secretary General and his staff. Once again, you've done a brilliant job, this for the 149th Assembly here in Geneva, and we welcome that. We would also like to thank all of the staff, people with the different delegations who have done everything they can to ensure that they keep up and monitor every situation. We were delighted to be able to welcome you here in my country, here in Geneva. I wish all of you a safe trip home, wish you every success in your future parliamentary endeavours, and look forward to meeting you at the 150th Assembly of the IPU next year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to the remarks by the Secretary General.
Madam President, distinguished members of the IPU, dear guests, delegates, I am cognizant of the lateness of the hour, but I would not resist the temptation or urge to express my deep satisfaction at the way this assembly has unfolded. Over the past few days, there have been several moments in this room and in other venues in this assembly building when our members have expressed opposing views and passions have run high. These moments can feel very tense and uncomfortable, but they are one of the main raison d'etre of our IPU assemblies. In this global forum for dialogue and diplomacy, we must all feel comfortable to express ourselves, listen respectfully, and search for common ground. As I reflect on the deliberations over the past several days, I am confident and convinced that the call that I launched at the opening of this assembly has been heard. I did enjoin all of you to be resilient, not to yield to despair in the face of the daunting challenges facing our global community. I am confident that that message was heard, that message of hope was heard, when we look at the various outcomes of our deliberations here. We have discussed science, technology, and innovation and heard many examples of good practice that parliaments are using to improve the way they are doing business for humanity. If harnessed and regulated properly, technological advances can help us achieve great things, including the resolution of the conflicts that we see around the world. The same is true for artificial intelligence. We need to keep our eye on the ball. It is clear that artificial intelligence presents many exciting opportunities, but we need to be ready to legislate for and mitigate the risk. We have rededicated ourselves to multilateralism in response to the United Nations Secretary General's appeal for greater support for the multilateral system. I am pleased that the emergency item resolution that was adopted earlier during this session has been inspired by the words of the UN Secretary General. This is, I believe, a fitting response to the message emerging from the Pact for the Future that Madam President mentioned in her report. The Pact for the Future clearly expresses the determination and commitment of member states of the United Nations to work with parliaments and the IPU in a joint fashion in order to resolve the conflicts that we are facing in the world today. And so the message of the emergency item resolution is very clear and unequivocal. You have recommitted, you have rededicated yourselves to a multilateral system that is better suited to addressing the multiplicity of challenges facing the world today. You have, during this session of the Assembly, celebrated a number of important anniversaries. You have celebrated the 10 years of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians. You have celebrated the 10 years of the Common Principles for Support to Parliaments, and you have celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Mine Ban Treaty. It may seem frivolous to celebrate these milestones, but in so doing, we bring these important issues back onto the agenda. Youth participation, mutual support for stronger parliaments, and of course, the complete elimination of anti-personnel mines are very critical issues indeed. We have once again seen the IPU family grow with the return of Jamaica and their prospects of other parliaments rejoining the fold of the IPU. Universal membership remains one of our greatest aspirations, and every step we take on the road towards achieving this is welcome. I encourage you to reach out to all those non-members of the IPU to realize the benefits of being part of our wonderful global parliamentary community. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot conclude my remarks without paying glowing tribute to our President, Dr. Tulia. We want to thank you very much and appreciate you for the sterling manner in which you have presided over the deliberations of this assembly. There have been ups and downs during this assembly, but all of these have been managed with maestro. I thank you very much for your leadership. As Secretary General of this organization, I reiterate our offer to continue to be of assistance to you in the discharge of the high office of President of the IPU. Let me also say how my colleagues and I have been honored to be able to provide you with the opportunity to carry out your deliberations in a more or less smooth fashion. We have had the privilege of hosting you over the past several days, and it has not been an easy task for us. However, I can assure you that my colleagues and I have put our best foot forward in order to deliver on your expectations. And on their behalf, I want to apologize for any shortcomings in the management of this event. Let me conclude by thanking the unsung heroes of our assemblies, those that we don't see, but who are working in the background to make this assembly a success. I'm referring to the language staff, the interpreters, the room assistants who have been here with us to break down barriers of communication. I really appreciate your contribution. I also want to pay tribute to the staff of the IPU. They are our foot soldiers, and I really appreciate their contribution in making this organization what it is. So thank you very much, and I will yield the floor. Madam President, may I be permitted to call on you to deliver your closing remarks. Thank you very much.
I was just about to call myself, and then the Secretary General volunteered, so I am grateful I didn't have to call myself. Dear friends, dear colleagues, it has been a busy assembly, and I am sure you are all keen for me to be brief. I'll try my best to be. It is with some regret that I have noted that at times the atmosphere at this assembly has been tense and polarized. As we have acknowledged in our emergency item resolution, and in the words of the United Nations Secretary General, the world is edging towards becoming a powder keg, paralyzed by dysfunction and held hostage by geopolitical tensions. I also regret that we have not been able to present a united position on the situation in the Middle East. But we must end this assembly on a note of positivity. The solutions are right here in front of us. A reinvigorated multilateral system, better respect for the fundamental principles of international law, a rejection of violence and human suffering, global cooperation to find solutions for a better future, and most importantly, dialogue. After all, that is what parliaments are all about: talking and listening. Parliamentary diplomacy will be key in repairing the damage of the past few years of global tension. Although the emergency item resolution does not focus on a specific situation, it is a first step in identifying the many areas of common ground we have and in rebuilding a consensus on how we can build a more peaceful world. And we have many other reasons to be proud of our achievements at this assembly. Our Committee to Promote Respect for International Humanitarian Law has adopted a strong plea for member parliaments to put pressure on the parties to the conflict in the Middle East to avert the full-scale war in the region, which would affect us all. In our general debate, colleagues and friends, we have taken good note that science, technology, and innovation can offer great hope for a more peaceful and sustainable future. We heard a note of true optimism from Bertrand Piccard that the technological solutions to protect our environment for future generations are already there. We just have to embrace them. We have begun to grapple with how artificial intelligence will impact our democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We must keep this question at the forefront of our minds, as this technology will only continue to advance, and we cannot imagine the ways in which it might be deployed, for good or for bad. And we have finally taken steps to modernize our statutes and rules, notably lowering the age below which we consider members of parliament to be young, but also fixing inconsistencies, removing redundant practices, and enshrining the new ones. Our work on this will continue to make the IPU fit for the future. Dear friends, dear colleagues, we must continue our work to uphold the values of this organization: democracy, equality, respect, inclusivity, solidarity, and dignity for all. And we must hold on to the hope that we can have a bright future. I thank you all for your commitment and hard work, and look forward to seeing you again in Uzbekistan next year. I would like to take this opportunity now to declare that the 149th Assembly is officially closed. So, colleagues, since we had agreed, the meeting is closed, but we are going to officially end it as we started with an anthem. So I'm going to request all of you to rise for our IPU anthem.
you.